So, David, thank you for inviting me. I missed last year, which pains me a great deal, and I'm really happy to have been invited back. I want to go through quickly some stuff about a new project I'm working on, and I want to preface it by saying what I'm really looking for. A lot of this conference is dealing with what we can do collectively to go in the direction I think that most of us here agree we should be going in. I'm going to focus a bit more on what we can do individually and from a very specific perspective about the control and lock-in that's going on around now. People like Jonathan Zittrain, Rebecca McKinnon, Doc Searles, a whole bunch of folks have been writing about this for a long time, of the control that's being taken away from us. And I sort of start with that. And it's fundamentally, there's something going on. It's not just that people like governments and companies are trying to take it away. We're giving it away because we prefer convenience to liberty with technology. That's pretty established at this point, and I'm concerned about it. You know, in the earlier days of the internet, I think that there was more congruence of convenience and freedom for a lot of reasons, one of which it was not as convenient. And we had to roll our own for the most part in key ways. And I think it's drifted apart over time. And I'm kind of worried about this trend and thinking about how do we pull these back together. And I'm just going to show you a few things that you already know about, I'm sure, for the most part, but that we have to think about what we're going to be doing in the future. The cloud is lovely and wonderful, but it's not the best thing for us, perhaps, in all respects. This was yesterday. Nick Bilton from the Times discovered that Facebook was promoting to people who were subscribing to him were not getting things that he posted unless he paid them. Now, I'm sure that they're going to remedy that for famous journalists, or maybe not, but it is something that's out there. The notion that the government can just go and order the takedown of domains, mostly, is alarming, especially when there's no, evidence. The so-called six strikes situation, which, this is a case of companies basically colluding to censor what you do, and that's fairly alarming. I don't think there's a precedent for that. And I say this one with great pain because I have been a shareholder in Amazon for a long time, and that's not a good thing. The Apple famous control freakery where they had to be embarrassed for that. Something I thought was interesting, a tweet a long time ago that Facebook engineers think they're like electricity. Well, that has some implications, like utility. Twitter, which I love and still use, is not shy of doing things like this. The WikiLeaks situation, which we all know about, and being pulled off the payment systems, there's now a workaround for that, but it's, I think, a workaround that could easily be jeopardized. The things we give away when we are using our mobile devices, that's screen one of the permissions that you're required to give for an app that many of us use. It's called Skype. That was not all, by the way, of the permissions that you grant Skype when you use it on Android. I found this one this morning. Jeff Jarvis tried to sell some used mobile phones on eBay and was told, sorry, you can't do that because we don't allow unlocked phones anymore due to a new law unless you can show that the carrier okayed this. Well, eBay makes its own law too. Bruce Schneier has made the point that when it comes to security in the cloud, that it's a kind of feudal setup. We're at their mercy. And it's not that they always do it right. We have problems with these systems, and I love the cloud, but I'm also a big fan of local storage. And I don't think enough of us rely enough on local. Our friends in law enforcement think that everything should be wiretap friendly always. Skype, back to them, they're actually, for years they've been refusing to say whether they can intercept, which I take to mean yes, they can. So what are the questions we have to ask? They're pretty clear for folks like you, but I'm going to repeat them anyway. Who's benefiting from it? Who runs it? And what I'm working on in this new project is, well, what can I do about it personally? And we do need to have better laws and to stop bad ones. And that is not in any dispute, but I wanted just to make a few suggestions about the arena I'm working in. I want to help people, average people, find best practices for themselves to add some liberty back into the system where it's being taken away. And of course, we should use full disk encryption. I think that should be automatic. I don't think it should be an option. I think that should just be what happens when you run a system. Update your software. Yes, amazing how many people I know don't do that. The extensions and add-ons to browsers that we can use are pretty powerful. We don't have enough people using them. Permissions in these mobile apps, well, in the case of Android, you can root your phone and you can then start denying specific permissions. What I'm unclear about is whether doing that makes us felons under the computer laws. Or potential felons, and I suspect it may. This is kind of alarming, and we're seeing at least a little bit of attention paid to the notion that the computer laws are insane and are abused badly, and we all know about a famous case that is constantly going to be on our minds these 2 days. But I don't know whether this would put me in jeopardy. I'm going to do it anyway, but I'm going to block some permissions. I think it's fine if the mobile app sees me blocking permissions and says, fine, okay, you can't, I won't let it work. I'll make that deal. If I block a permission that they want and they prevent it from operating, that seems reasonable. But I don't want there to be no choice. Not enough people know about Tor, and I hope more will. I work a lot with people in journalism. We heard just a while ago from a recovering politician. I'm a semi-recovering journalist because I still can't stop myself from doing it time to time. And with journalists, and especially in other countries, but increasingly I think in the US, the need for better security is going to be clear, and again, people in the journalism business really don't have a clue about what it means to be secure. They've been taking for granted things I don't think they should. Another countermeasure I've been kind of noodling on, and I think we need some software for this, is it harkens back to something that I participated in back in the 1990s when the supermarket loyalty cards first came out, and a bunch of us would get together about once a month or so and toss our Safeway, et cetera, cards into a hat and pull out someone else's and then do our shopping. And I don't think that violated any federal law, but it was, the point of it was to make the data not very useful and to not have anything be obviously tracked to us. Not that I cared much that anyone knew that I eat potato chips, but the whole idea of being exposed to potential harm bothered people, and I think what we need to do, and I would love to hear your ideas on how we might do it, but I'd like to see some mobile apps that do the same sort of thing, which is to have a process that sends back bad data and inform the vendor that the data that's coming to you is wrong. It's not the stuff that I'm actually creating. And so that we don't deliberately poison their data set, but I want to make it less useful. And I want them not to have as much on me. Now, again, that undoubtedly would violate the terms of service and expose folks to potential felony charges under the Obama theory of rule. That's alarming, and I hope we fix that too. But I'm increasingly thinking countermeasures of this sort would be pretty useful. The platforms we use are obviously important, and I won't belabor this, but I opted out of the Apple ecosystem a while back, and I was the biggest Apple fan there was. Well, maybe not the biggest, but I was a definite Apple person all the way. But I couldn't bear anymore being part of that ecosystem because of Apple's control freakery that gets worse and worse and worse. So what did I do? I moved first to Android and then to Android OSs that were add-ons later that were not the Google one, but the Google one taken and improved by the hacker community. And I'm reasonably comfortable doing this. There are always issues with it. It's still not as easy as it ought to be. It's actually easier to jailbreak and unlock your iPhone than a lot of Android stuff. But the necessity, I think, of doing this becomes clearer to me all the time, and we should be looking at finding better ways for people. I'm quite intrigued by the Firefox OS that's coming soon from Mozilla, as well as the Ubuntu phone. I don't know I don't know to what extent those are going to deal with baseband and things like that, but I think this is useful to have, and I'm pretty happy with a phone that just operates mostly as a phone and a few other services. I don't need all of the things that I have at the moment. We need our own places on the web. We shouldn't just be posting to the usual suspects and think that that's our presence. So one thing I do with students in a class I'm teaching, I'm giving them extra credit if they get their own domain name, hopefully with their own name. Because I think they need it. I keep trying to explain to them that Facebook page should not be their only presence on the web. That's a mistake. That it's a long-range mistake, and I'm not talking about Facebook's penchant for abusing privacy and everything else. I'm talking about the fact that when we put our information and our data on other people's sites, it lives there at their pleasure only as long as they want it there or as long as they are around. I think this is something my students don't get, and I keep pushing it, and so this is a little bribery to get them to do something that will help them, I think, if they understand their careers as being startups and something that they have to nurture. And I've gone kind of to extremes on this stuff. Well, not extremes, as I'll point out. But I've gone a fair distance, which is to drop the Mac OS, which I still think is the best operating system out there, and use Linux instead. And Linux is really good now. You know, it's really good. I've found Ubuntu and others to be quite good enough for what I do. The fact that I have to occasionally go to the command line means that it's not going to be for everybody, but that's improving, even more quickly than I expect. And I'm not suggesting that everyone do this. There are a lot of other measures we can take to be safer, more secure, have more liberty without going to this degree. But I'm hoping that these kinds of things will get further traction. And it was quite painless for me to do this. Once my fingers got adjusted to control instead of Apple, control stuff instead of Apple stuff, it was fine. And while there are a few things that I would like to have that I can't get on here, you know, when I really have to run Windows, I can do it in a VM. I should point out my hypocrisy in all this, which is that if you see up there, I have a Twitter account that's very active. So I'm putting my stuff into Twitter. I'm using Google Plus because I get great engagement there. I've actually reduced my own blogging, which is a mistake. I think I've got to get back to that. I left Facebook finally. I just couldn't take it anymore. And so to some degree, I'm a hypocrite on these things, but I'm trying to wean myself away as much as I can from the places where I lose control. And at the bottom line here is a plan B, to always have a plan B. And that's sort of where I'm taking this project. And I don't want to get into sort of, is somebody evil or not? I don't think it's so much about that as what the self-interest is involved for these companies and for law enforcement and others. But I do want to try and pull these circles back together again, if it's possible. I want to see if we can find a way to bring the convenience and liberty back in sync. I'm not sure we can, but I think it's important that we try, even as the people in this room work on getting the collective community together to have better laws and better policies. And I need your help. This is the thing I'm working on. I certainly don't have the answers, and I'm looking for better answers. And that's my email, and I'm pretty easy to find anyway. But this is a project I'm passionate about and going to spend a lot of my time in the next few months on, maybe a lot longer than that. And with that, thank you for having me again, David, and it's a joy to be with you folks. Thanks.